Picture this, the love of your life calmly packing her things, telling you she's heading off on a romantic getaway, with her boss. No heated arguments, no tears, just a cold, calculated betrayal. Now imagine she adds that this affair has been happening for months and there's nothing you can do to stop it. In that moment, my entire world crumbled, and what came next would test just how far someone stripped of everything can go. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, each tick hammering into Daniel's skull like a countdown to disaster. He leaned against the doorframe, his eyes fixed on Olivia as she neatly folded clothes into her suitcase. Clothes he once loved seeing her wear. His stomach churned as he watched her hum softly, some upbeat tune that felt painfully out of place. For her, this evening might as well have been any other. For Daniel, it was anything but. "What are you doing?" Daniel finally asked, breaking the suffocating silence. His voice trembled, heavy with the weight of disbelief. Without even glancing his way, Olivia replied with unnerving nonchalance, "Packing." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Packing for what?" he pressed, his voice edged with tension as he struggled to rein in his emotions. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, as though deciding how much to reveal. Then, with a trace of enthusiasm, she answered, "A trip. For two. With my boss. And there's nothing you can do about it." The word struck him like a blow to the chest. "A trip for two? You've got to be joking," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. Finally, Olivia looked at him, her expression equal parts annoyed and impatient. "No, Daniel, I'm not joking. We're going to a resort. It's an opportunity for me to get closer to him." Daniel's mind raced, trying to process the full implications of what she was saying. "Get closer? What the hell does that mean, Olivia?" She leveled a pointed look at him, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "It means showing him just how flexible I can be, in bed." Her words cut like a knife. "He's promised me a promotion if I play my cards right." Daniel felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. His legs wobbled, and he grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. "You're actually saying this out loud? You're sleeping with your boss?" Olivia shrugged, her casual demeanor adding to his torment. "It's been going on for a while. And, honestly, Daniel, he's better than you in every way." Her words landed like a physical blow. Daniel had suspected something was off, the late nights, the secretive messages, but hearing her fling the truth at him so brazenly was devastating. His hands curled into fists as a mix of anger and heartbreak boiled inside him. "Olivia, if you walk out of here tonight, don't think for a second that I'll just let this slide. This marriage will be over," he warned, his voice low and shaking with rage. She laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent chills down his spine. "Daniel, this marriage ended months ago. The moment I started seeing my boss, I realized how little you had to offer. You were just too blind to notice." Her words blurred in his mind as his anger reached a boiling point. The woman he saw now was a stranger, a far cry from the Olivia he had fallen for. "Why, Olivia? What did I do to deserve this?" His voice cracked under the weight of his emotions. Rolling her eyes, she tossed a pair of high heels into the suitcase. "Why not, Daniel? I'm done with this boring life. He gives me excitement, ambition, a future. You don't. It's that simple." Desperate, Daniel searched for something, anything, that might change her mind. "We can fix this, Olivia. We'll go to therapy. We can still save what we have. Don't throw it all away for this, fling." She stopped packing to glare at him, irritation etched into her face. "A fling? You think this is just about sex? This is about my happiness, my career, my future. And, Daniel, you don't fit into any of it anymore." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He stepped closer, his voice dropping into a dangerous calm. "You don't have to do this, Olivia. There's always another way. But Olivia shook her head, zipping the suitcase with a finality that made his heart sink. No, Daniel. I'm done with this life. I'm done with you. She brushed past him without a second glance, her perfume trailing behind her as she walked out of the bedroom. Daniel stood frozen, disbelief crashing over him like a tidal wave. This couldn't be real, not after everything they'd built together. But when the sound of the front door slamming reached his ears, the crushing reality of her betrayal set in. Olivia was gone. And this time, there was no chance she'd be coming back. For a fleeting moment, Daniel felt unmoored, as if the very foundation beneath him had vanished. But then, something deep within him shifted. The sharp ache of betrayal and shock began to harden, morphing into a cold, unwavering determination. Standing in the living room, his eyes fixated on the door she had just walked through, his breaths grew steadier, his resolve firmer. So that's how it's going to be, he muttered under his breath, his voice low but resolute. Fine. You'll get exactly what you're asking for. The rhythmic ticking of the clock filled the silence, each sound pressing him forward, reminding him that time waits for no one. His mind cleared as a single truth crystallized. Olivia believed she could toss their life aside as if it were disposable, but she'd soon learn how wrong she was. She had made her move, now, it was his turn. He was going to ensure her actions came with consequences, ones she'd never see coming. Daniel waited, watching through the window until her car rounded the corner and vanished from sight. Every muscle in his body was taut, but his thoughts were razor-sharp. He wasn't the impulsive type, he had always been the calm and collected one. But tonight was different. Tonight, he would take back control. Without hesitation, he strode to the home office, shutting the door firmly behind him. The room was filled with remnants of their shared life, photographs, framed certificates, and books they had picked out together. But Daniel ignored them, his focus locked on the desk where Olivia's work laptop sat. She had always trusted him to leave it untouched, never imagining he'd have any reason to pry. He sat down, flipped open the laptop, and stared at the login screen. Without a second thought, he entered the password, a combination of their wedding date and her favorite color. The desktop came to life, cluttered with files and open documents. His fingers hovered over the trackpad for a moment before he clicked on the email icon. The inbox appeared, filled with mundane work correspondence, but Daniel wasn't interested in those. He typed her boss's name into the search bar, and a flood of emails materialized, a stark, undeniable reminder of her betrayal. He opened the first one and began to read. Can't wait for this weekend. Booked the best suite for us. Finally, some uninterrupted time together. Don't worry about work, I'll handle everything. Daniel's jaw tightened as a wave of anger surged through him. His hand trembled slightly as he copied the emails, dragging them into a new folder labeled Personal, right on her desktop. Next, he plugged a USB drive into the laptop, transferring every last piece of incriminating evidence. He wasn't just planning to confront Olivia, he was going to dismantle the fantasy she was building on a foundation of deceit. Once the emails were safely stored, Daniel turned his attention to her work chat logs. These messages were more casual, filled with flirtatious banter, late-night jokes, and intimate exchanges that left no room for doubt. He saved these too, adding them to the USB drive. When he finished, he meticulously erased any signs of his snooping, ensuring the laptop looked untouched. Sitting back in the chair, he stared at the screen, but there was no relief. The satisfaction would come later. Tonight, his focus was on the task at hand. The laptop was only the beginning. Rising from the chair, Daniel left the office and made his way to the bedroom. Olivia's vanity stood in the corner, cluttered with makeup, perfume, and jewelry. Opening the top drawer, he found her jewelry box brimming with pieces he had gifted her over the years, symbols of love that now felt like a cruel joke. Mixed in with those were newer, more extravagant items he didn't recognize. One bracelet in particular caught his attention, the one she had flaunted, bragging that it was a gift from her boss. The thought of her wearing it, likely during her secret rendezvous, made his blood boil. Daniel grabbed the bracelet, along with a handful of other expensive pieces, and slipped them into his pocket. These would be the first things to vanish. Olivia had cherished these items, flaunted them every chance she got, basking in the attention they brought. She wouldn't even notice they were gone until it was far too late, and by then, it wouldn't matter. Next, he headed to the closet, where Olivia's clothes hung in neat, organized rows. His eyes went straight to the suitcase perched on the top shelf, the one she always used for her so-called business trips. Pulling it down, he unzipped it and began yanking her designer dresses and high-end shoes from their hangers, stuffing them inside with little care. He crumpled and creased the garments on purpose, his anger surging as he thought of how much she'd spent on these. To Olivia, they symbolized power and allure, but to Daniel, they were just meaningless objects, easily taken away. Once the suitcase was full, Daniel zipped it shut and shoved it under the bed, out of sight. She wouldn't realize it was missing until the moment she needed it, and by then, her carefully constructed world would already be unraveling. From there, Daniel turned his attention to something more critical, their finances. He strode back into the office, sat down at the desk, and logged into their joint bank account. The balance on the screen was a glaring reminder of the life they had built together, a life she had thrown away. Without hesitation, he navigated to the transfer page and entered the details for his private account. He had set it up years ago as a safeguard, and tonight, it would finally serve its purpose. He initiated the transfer and watched as the balance in their shared account plummeted. Olivia would notice eventually, but by the time she did, there would be nothing she could do to undo it. This wasn't just about money, it was about dismantling her safety net, her sense of security, and any future she thought she could build off her betrayal. When the transaction was complete, Daniel logged out, shut the laptop, and leaned back in his chair. The stillness in the room felt charged, like the quiet just before a storm. He rose, walked into the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. The simple act grounded him, a reminder that there was no turning back now. As he sipped, his mind raced over everything he had done so far. This wasn't just revenge, it was about sending a message. Olivia needed to understand that her choices carried weight, and she'd have to bear the consequences of tearing their life apart. But there was more to be done. Daniel intended to make sure she couldn't recover from this. Picking up his phone, he scrolled through his contacts until he found a number he hadn't dialed in years, a lawyer he knew from work. They weren't exactly friends, but Daniel had helped the man out in the past, and now it was time to call in that favor. Tonight, he needed results, and he needed them fast. After a few rings, a groggy voice answered. "Hello. It's Daniel," he said, his voice steady and firm. "I need your help." "Daniel? What's going on?" the lawyer asked, his tone shifting from confusion to alertness. "I'm filing for divorce," Daniel replied without hesitation. "I want it done fast. Can you handle that?" There was a pause before the lawyer answered cautiously. "Yeah, I can take care of it. But are you sure about this? What happened?" Daniel's tone didn't waver. "Just get the paperwork started. I'll send you the details in the morning." "All right," the lawyer said. "I'll get things moving." Ending the call, Daniel set the phone down and stared at it for a moment. His thoughts were already moving ahead to the next steps. Olivia might have started this war, but he would be the one to finish it. She had taken their life together and twisted it into something grotesque. Now, piece by piece, he was going to strip away everything she valued, leaving her with nothing. Returning to the bedroom, Daniel stopped in the doorway. His eyes flicked to the suitcase stashed beneath the bed and the half-empty jewelry box sitting on her vanity. This was only the beginning. 2 days passed. The living room was bathed in shadows, the only light coming from the faint glow of the computer screen resting on the coffee table. Daniel sat in an armchair facing the front door, his heart beating steadily, though his mind was strangely calm. He had been waiting for hours, replaying every detail of his plan in his head, and with each passing moment, his resolve grew stronger. Finally, the sound Daniel had been waiting for reached his ears, a car pulling into the driveway. He didn't stir, keeping his eyes fixed on the door as the engine cut off and the familiar click of Olivia's heels echoed on the pavement. The front door creaked open, and she stepped inside, her face a mixture of weariness and irritation. But her expression shifted the moment she saw the scene in front of her. "What the?" Olivia's words trailed off as her gaze swept over the scattered documents, the open laptop, and Daniel's cold, unflinching stare. Confusion flashed across her face, quickly giving way to an uneasy tension. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. "What's all this?" Daniel let the silence linger, the weight of it pressing down on her as her discomfort deepened. Finally, he rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, and took a step closer. "Welcome home, Olivia," he said, his tone calm but edged with ice. "I trust your trip was enjoyable." Her eyes darted to the laptop and the papers spread out on the table. The blood drained from her face as recognition dawned, emails, chat logs, incriminating screenshots. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling now. Daniel took another step toward her, his gaze locked on hers. "This," he said evenly, "is the evidence. Proof of your lies, your betrayal, and your shameless greed." Her hands shook as she instinctively backed away. You went through my things?" she asked, her voice a mix of anger and rising fear. "Every last bit of it," Daniel replied, his tone flat, emotionless. "The emails, the messages, the pictures, I've seen it all. I know everything, Olivia." Her breath hitched, and her eyes darted around the room as though searching for an escape. "Wait, Daniel, I can explain," she stammered, desperation creeping into her voice. "Explain." Daniel's voice rose sharply, cutting through her plea. "Explain how you've been sleeping with your boss. How you've been planning this affair for months behind my back." Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came. The weight of his accusations rendered her speechless, her face growing paler by the second. "This isn't what you think," she said finally, her voice shaking as she tried to grasp at straws. Daniel took another step, closing the gap between them until he was mere inches from her. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," he said, his voice low and steely. "And I've made sure everyone else knows it too. I sent those emails, those messages, to your boss's wife, to HR, to our friends, and even to your family. Everyone knows, Olivia. They all know." Her face contorted with horror as his words sank in. "You can't do that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't just destroy my life like this." Daniel's gaze hardened, his expression as cold as his words. "I already have. And trust me, Olivia, this is just the beginning." Tears filled her eyes as she reached out toward him, her voice raw with desperation. "Daniel, please, we can fix this. We can work through it. Don't do this to me. Don't ruin everything." Daniel glanced at her hand, hovering in the air between them, and for a fleeting moment, he felt the sting of their past, the love they once shared. But the memory of her betrayal quickly snuffed it out. He stepped back, deliberately moving out of her reach. "Everything was ruined the moment you decided to cheat," he said, gesturing toward the pile of evidence on the table. This is all that's left of what we had." Olivia's tears spilled over as she sank to her knees, clutching at his pant legs. "Please, Daniel," she sobbed. "I made a mistake, I know that. But we can start over. We can rebuild. I love you, I never stopped loving you." Daniel looked down at her, his heart colder than ever. "You didn't love me, Olivia. You loved what I gave you, the stability, the comfort. But when that wasn't enough, you threw it all away for more. You betrayed me, and now you'll face the consequences." Her sobs grew louder, her body shaking as she cried. "Don't do this," she begged. "I'll quit my job, cut him off completely, anything you want. Just please, don't leave me." Daniel's expression remained unmoved. "It's too late for that," he said, his voice firm. "I've already filed for divorce. The papers will be here tomorrow." Olivia gasped, her face crumpling in disbelief. "No, Daniel, no, you can't." "I can," he said sharply, "and I already have. Tomorrow, you'll be served. Now pack your things and leave. I've moved the money and the assets. You'll get what's left, but it won't be much." A wail escaped Olivia as she collapsed fully onto the floor, her cries echoing through the room. "Daniel, I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Without looking back, Daniel turned away, his resolve unwavering. He paused for a moment, listening to her anguished cries, the sound of her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. But he didn't turn around. Not this time. At last, the sound Daniel had been waiting for reached his ears, the hum of a car pulling into the driveway. He didn't stir, staying perfectly still as the engine went silent and the familiar click of Olivia's heels echoed against the pavement. The front door creaked open, and she stepped inside, her face clouded with a mix of fatigue and irritation. But her expression quickly shifted as her eyes landed on the scene before her. "What the—" Olivia's voice faltered, her gaze darting between the scattered documents, the open laptop, and Daniel's cold, unyielding stare. The confusion on her face morphed into unease. "Daniel," she said cautiously, her voice tight, laced with uncertainty. "What is this?" Daniel didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch out, heavy and oppressive. He watched her unease deepen, saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet, his movements deliberate and steady. Taking a step closer, he finally spoke. "Welcome home, Olivia," he said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "Did you enjoy your little trip?" Her eyes flitted nervously to the laptop and the papers spread across the table. As recognition dawned, her face turned pale. What is all this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel closed the distance between them by another step, his gaze unwavering. "This," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "is the truth. Proof of your lies. Evidence of your betrayal. And a clear picture of your greed." Olivia's hands began to shake as she instinctively stepped back, her confusion giving way to panic. You went through my things," she stammered, her voice oscillating between anger and fear. "Every single bit of it," Daniel replied coldly, his tone devoid of any emotion. "I've read the emails, the messages, seen the photos. I know everything, Olivia." Her breath hitched, and her eyes darted wildly around the room, as if searching for an escape. "Daniel, wait, let me explain," she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "Explain." Daniel's voice cut through her like a whip. "Explain what, Olivia? How you've been sleeping with your boss. How you've been orchestrating this entire affair behind my back for months." Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her silence spoke louder than any denial could. The blood drained from her face as she realized there was no way out of this. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, fumbling for an excuse, any excuse. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," Daniel shot back, taking another step forward until he was just inches away from her. "And just so you know, I've made sure everyone else sees it too. Your boss's wife, HR, our friends, your family, they all have copies of those emails and messages. Everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done." Horror twisted Olivia's features as his words sank in. "You can't do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't just destroy my life like this." Daniel's face hardened, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen them. "I already have," he said with finality. "And trust me, it's only the beginning." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, and she reached out to him, her hand trembling in midair. Her voice cracked as she begged, "Daniel, please. We can fix this. We can work through it. Don't ruin everything. Don't do this." Daniel's gaze flicked to her outstretched hand. For a fleeting moment, the pain of what they once had tugged at him, but the memory of her betrayal quickly snuffed it out. He stepped back, deliberately putting distance between them. "Everything was ruined the moment you decided to cheat," he said, gesturing to the damning evidence on the table. "What you're looking at. This is all that's left of our marriage, shattered pieces of something you destroyed." Olivia's tears spilled over as she collapsed to her knees, her hands clutching at his pant legs. "Please, Daniel," she sobbed. "I made a mistake, I know, but we can start over. We can rebuild. I love you, I never stopped loving you." Daniel looked down at her, his expression as icy as his tone. "You didn't love me, Olivia. You loved the comfort and stability I gave you. But when that wasn't enough, you threw it all away. You betrayed me, and now you're going to face the consequences." Her sobs grew louder, her body shaking with the weight of her regret. "Don't do this," she cried. "I'll quit my job, cut him off, do whatever it takes. Just please, don't leave me." "It's too late," Daniel said, his voice firm and unwavering. "I've already filed for divorce. The papers will be here tomorrow." Olivia gasped, her eyes widening with disbelief. "No. No, you can't." "I can," Daniel said sharply, "and I already have. Tomorrow, you'll be served. Pack your things and leave. The money and assets have been moved. You'll get what's left, but don't expect much." A wail erupted from Olivia as she crumpled onto the floor, her cries reverberating through the room. "Daniel, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Without so much as a glance back, Daniel turned and walked away, his resolve unshaken. He paused for a brief moment, listening to the sound of her broken sobs echoing through the house. But he didn't turn around. Not anymore. "Mr. Carter, this is Rachel from the HR department at Olivia's company," the voice on the other end of the line said. "We're calling to inform you that Olivia has been terminated, effective immediately. Due to the nature of her violations, her severance package has been revoked." Daniel listened without so much as a flicker of emotion. "Thank you for letting me know," he replied, his tone flat and even. The call ended, and Daniel lowered the phone, staring at it for a long moment. It was done. Olivia had lost everything, her career, her reputation, her future. The sense of justice he had anticipated, the satisfaction he thought he would feel, began to dissolve, leaving behind only a hollow ache. Balance had been restored, but the weight of what it had cost pressed heavily on him. The next call came from Olivia herself. It was the first time she had reached out since that night she came home from her trip. His first instinct was to let it ring, to let her words fall into the void of voicemail. But something made him answer, curiosity or maybe just a lingering need to confront the remnants of their shattered connection. "Daniel," her voice came through, fragile and trembling. I just got fired. They said I violated company policy. I've lost everything, Daniel. Everything." He didn't respond immediately, letting her words hang in the silence. The sound of her uneven breathing filled the pause, a reminder of her vulnerability. "Please, Daniel," she continued, her voice cracking with desperation. "I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I never thought it would come to this. I thought I could manage it all, but I was wrong. Now I've lost everything, and I don't know what to do. I need you." For a moment, Daniel felt something stir deep inside, perhaps pity, maybe even regret. But it was fleeting, quickly smothered by the bitter anger still simmering in his chest. "Olivia," he said at last, his voice cold and composed, "this is what happens when you make the choices you made. You betrayed me. You lied to me. You tore our marriage apart because you wanted something more. Now, you're facing the consequences I warned you about. But I never thought," her voice broke into a sob. "I never thought you'd go this far. I didn't think you'd destroy me like this." Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling slowly as he steadied himself. "You destroyed yourself, Olivia. All I did was make sure you couldn't escape the consequences." The line went silent. For a moment, he thought she had hung up, but then her voice returned, softer now, shattered. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. If I could undo it all, I would." Daniel didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. He ended the call, placing the phone on the table with trembling hands. It was over. The fallout was complete. Olivia's life lay in ruins, and he had orchestrated every piece of it. Yet as he sat there, alone in the quiet house, an unsettling emptiness began to creep in. The satisfaction he had imagined would come from his revenge was nowhere to be found. Instead, a heavy void settled in its place. He had achieved everything he set out to do, but at a cost he hadn't fully reckoned with. Daniel remained seated at the kitchen table, the silence of the house enveloping him like a suffocating blanket. The sun had long since disappeared, and the soft glow of a single lamp on the counter cast long shadows across the room. This house, once alive with laughter, shared meals, and whispered dreams, now felt lifeless, just a shell of what it had been. His gaze drifted to the chair across from him, the one where Olivia used to sit during their dinners. He could almost hear her voice again, replaying their conversations about their days, their hopes, and the future they thought they'd share. But now those memories felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else entirely, a different man, a different life. The phone buzzed against the table, jolting him from his thoughts, but Daniel didn't bother picking it up. The messages had been constant since the scandal broke, some from acquaintances gloating over Olivia's downfall, others expressing shock at the fallout. He ignored them all. The revenge that had fueled him for so long now weighed heavily on his shoulders, a burden he wasn't sure he could bear much longer. Daniel stood and wandered into the living room, his eyes falling on the coffee table where the remnants of his revenge still lay scattered. The laptop sat open, displaying the damning emails and messages that had unraveled Olivia's life. He stared at the screen, the words blurring as his mind replayed the whirlwind of the past few weeks. He had wanted her to pay, and she had. Olivia had lost everything, her career, her friends, her future. He had made sure of it. But as he stood there, he realized that he had lost something too. The anger that had once driven him had burned itself out, leaving behind a hollow ache he didn't know how to soothe. With a heavy sigh, Daniel shut the laptop and sank onto the couch, tilting his head back to stare at the ceiling. His thoughts turned inward, dwelling on the man he had become and the lengths he had gone to destroy Olivia's life. At the time, it had seemed justified, even necessary. But now, in the aftermath, the triumph he'd anticipated felt hollow, the victory meaningless. The sharp chime of the doorbell broke through his thoughts, startling him. He hesitated for a moment, uncertain who it could be. When he opened the door, the sight that greeted him made his breath catch. Olivia stood on the porch, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. The sadness etched into her features was profound, cutting through him in a way he didn't expect. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice fragile and unsteady. "I didn't know where else to go." For a moment, he was too stunned to respond. The last time he had seen her, she had been on her knees, begging for forgiveness. Now, she looked like a shadow of the woman she used to be. "What do you want, Olivia?" His voice came out weary, drained of the fire that had once fueled his every word. She paused, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I just wanted to talk," she said softly, lifting her eyes to meet his. "Please, Daniel, just hear me out." He exhaled deeply, the weight of the moment pressing on him. Without a word, he stepped aside, letting her in. Olivia walked into the living room hesitantly, her eyes scanning the space as if she were seeing it for the first time. The silence between them was thick and suffocating, filled with all the unspoken words of the past few weeks. They sat across from each other, the tension in the room almost tangible. Olivia clasped her hands tightly in her lap, her knuckles whitening from the pressure. After a moment, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I know you hate me," she began, barely able to meet his eyes. "And I can't blame you for that. I've lost everything because of what I did, and I deserve it. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you like this." Daniel's expression remained blank, his eyes fixed on her. "But you did, Olivia," he said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of his pain. "You hurt me in ways I didn't think were possible." Her tears began to fall as she nodded, her voice cracking. "I know. And I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I need you to believe me, I never planned for any of this. I got caught up in something I couldn't control. I was selfish and stupid. I thought I could have it all, my career, my affair, and still keep you." Daniel's fists clenched as he fought to keep his composure. The anger he thought had faded bubbled up again, though it was no longer a fiery rage but a deep, aching sorrow. "You can't have everything, Olivia," he said, his voice filled with quiet resignation. "You made a choice. You chose him over us." She wiped at her tears with shaking hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. And I lost. I lost everything because I couldn't see what I was throwing away. I don't expect you to forgive me, Daniel. But I need you to know, I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." Daniel looked away, his gaze fixing on a spot on the floor. He had spent countless hours imagining this moment, rehearsing the words he would say if she ever came back. But now, sitting across from her, every rehearsed line felt hollow and meaningless. "I've already forgiven you, Olivia," Daniel said softly, his voice calm but tinged with sorrow. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't bring back what we lost." Olivia's shoulders slumped under the weight of his words, her expression crumbling. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't respond right away. The question lingered in the air, heavy and unavoidable. He stared at the floor, searching for an answer that wouldn't come easily. When he finally spoke, his tone carried the weight of acceptance. "I don't know, Olivia," he admitted. "I honestly don't know." The silence that followed was thick, wrapping around them like an oppressive fog. Both of them seemed to understand, without needing to say it aloud, that the damage was irreversible. What they once shared, love, trust, and a future full of possibility, had been replaced by a painful reality neither could ignore. "I think it's time for us to move on," Daniel said at last, his voice steady, though it carried a finality that cut through the quiet. "You need to figure out your next steps, and I need to figure out who I am, without you." Olivia nodded slowly, tears streaking down her face. "I understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. I just hope that someday, you'll find peace." Daniel rose from his seat, signaling the end of their conversation. His eyes softened slightly, though his resolve remained firm. "I hope you find it too, Olivia. I really do." She looked at him one last time, her gaze filled with a mixture of regret and sorrow, before turning toward the door. Her footsteps echoed softly through the stillness of the house, each step marking the close of a chapter. When the door clicked shut behind her, the sound reverberated through the emptiness, leaving Daniel standing alone. For a moment, he simply stood there, staring at the door, feeling the strange weight of finality settle over him. The chapter of his life defined by betrayal and revenge had come to an end. Yet, as he stood in the quiet, he realized that the end of one chapter didn't mean the end of the story. His journey wasn't over, not yet. The future stretched before him, uncertain and undefined, but Daniel knew one thing for sure, he couldn't let himself remain trapped in the past. The wreckage of the life he had known couldn't be rebuilt, but he could start anew. He had to. And as he took a slow, deep breath, he felt it, a faint flicker of something he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't strong, just a small, fragile ember buried under the weight of everything he'd endured. But it was there. Hope. It glimmered faintly in the darkness, a tiny light guiding him forward toward the unknown. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Daniel allowed himself to believe that, maybe, brighter days were still ahead.